That's the main thing. Learning to fit in. Don't make waves, Norman. Fit in. Learn to fit in, Norman.
In the first phase, and now after we start touring, there is some little movement of the car. But then really very subtle movement. We'd like to see it again, or we shall wait alright, to make it on. You see, this is touring, some good look, open slightly, very subtle, very gentle. the motivation of the patient, which are the mechanisms through which the brain works, and animals, and especially human beings, behave. This is the process of our lives.
Hello and welcome to Tormentor radio show on Radio Libertaire. Today we are delighted to have on the phone Nigel Ayers from one of the most influential acts in experimental music, Nocturnal Emissions, initiated around 1980 with his brother Daniel Ayers and the much regretted Caroline Kay. His production is quite plentiful with a broad spectrum of music styles. He also runs the label Sterile Records, followed by Earthly Delights. And we hope to be able to discuss a maximum of topics with him. Hello, Nigel.
Hello. Welcome to my world. Well,
welcome in the show. We are very happy to have you tonight. So we have tons of questions for you tonight. Can you explain us? I think you started firstly with Sterile Records at the time, probably for the production of your own project, knowing that you started with the Pump project before Nocturnal Emissions. Is it true? Is it what I just said?
Yeah, I used to do cassettes. I mean, when I very first started doing this kind of thing in around 1980, I started. I was doing cassette releases mostly as the Pump. Well, exclusively as the Pump. Wasn't actually doing any performances, but I was doing quite a lot of mail art, really, and just making contacts with people who might be interested in the sort of crossovers between music and, let's say, the sort of open cultural experiments which were happening in mail art. A sort of a democratic approach to music production, maybe. It wasn't sort of star orientated, and it was sort of geared towards experimentation and finding new forms and bypassing the existing commercial systems of music, really, and working on the ideas of networks. So from that, in about, I'll say it was 1980, early 1980, I did a cassette release called Standard Response with a few of the people I was in touch with at the time, and I can't remember what the credits were on it, but I think there was Maurizio Bianchi was probably on it, Vitre Baroni, and also in Italy, and the guy Jeff Rushton, who went on to do Coil, he was on that as well, and some of his collaborators, Cultural Amnesia, who were some kids who went to school with him. I knew him when he was at school. He was in touch with me then. So I did this compilation. That was called Standard Response. But when I did the first Nocturnal Emissions record, it didn't actually have a label name at the time. So I think I was just labelled as EMIS 001. I don't think it had a label name by that time. But then I was approached by Maurizio Bianchi after I did my first record, MB, and he wanted me to put out a record of his on my label. And I said, well, I haven't got a label. But I think I was sort of messing around with ideas of a label title. I called it Sterile Records, and I was about to put out my own second record by that time, our own second record by that time. So I think we launched it as Sterile Records. We just wrote Sterile Records in the corner from that time onwards, and using this logo, which was of a bunny rabbit in a vivisection experiment in this box. So this small animal is being experimented on for cosmetics, and that was sort of an inversion, really, of the idea of the Playboy bunny, which was like this glamorized jet set lifestyle image, which was sort of being promoted for sort of James Bond ultra individualist types. It was kind of an inversion of that, just looking at the underside of this sort of glamorized system, really.
Yeah, actually, I was looking on internet and I discovered your interview that you lately did with Kevin Key, and he was asking about that. And I think it's also, for what I've looked through internet, you were one of the very first band in experimental music that used and not really spoke, but approached the subject of vivisection.
Yeah, well, the idea of animals having as an equal right to life and to a decent life as the rest of us, and the rest of the world not being a resource, but letting the rest of the world have a life of its own without this sort of human dominance over everything. That's sort of very much been a part of my sort of operating philosophy for a very long time. I think I was vegetarian from the age of 15. So like by the time I started doing Nocturnal Emissions, I would have been like a full-time vegetarian for about 8 years or something. You know, it was just something that it wasn't something that I was banging on about, but it was just like how my approach to the world is. I wasn't telling everybody this. So it's sort of naturally looking into ideas such as the impact of technology and the impact of big business and the medicalization of what are actually social problems and that through the military industrial complex. It is a sort of very much an industrialization and a huge commoditization of natural resources. And really, it's a continuation from the years of slavery, really. A lot of that slavery and colonialism is just still going on, this sort of in this sort of luxury form. I think we live off the luxury produce, and we let other parts of the world suffer from wars and pollution and poverty, while in the privileged West, we don't get to see so much of that, apart from the threat of it on the news, or the constant threat of it, actually, the constant anxiety that, oh no, this is going to catch up with us. And to a large extent, the whole system is built on this permanent anxiety, a status anxiety, let's say. So, yeah, looking at that.
So when you started Nocturnal Emission, what was the primary ideas behind the project? Did you, right from the start, decide to do it with your brother and with Caroline, or how did you build the project at the very beginning of it?
I would have worked with anybody available, really. They happened to be the nearest people. I knew them both very well. I'd known Caroline for several years before we ever did this. And I think what was interesting was we were learning together, really. I wouldn't really have been helpful for me in that stage in developing my art with session musicians or with trained musicians in that way. I think it was important to work out a new form of music for me. Mm-hmm. Because I think that was where the idea of a breakthrough might happen, used with untrained people working quite naively, I suppose. I mean, I was working quite naively myself, but I thought through this naiveness, there might be some sort of a breakthrough so that we're not turning out product, if you see what I mean. I know I've been very active over the years, but the idea was not to turn out product. The idea was to investigate this kind of borderline of areas of experience, music as experience rather than music as notes, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And a very integrated form of music, so that the overlap between the visual side of what we're presenting and the musical side, they weren't sort of segmented channels which were done by various experts, if you see what I mean. The same people were working visually as they were on the audio. So, and it was very much a collaboration. We sort of lose track of who did what because the work was shared so much. But various stages were taken up at different points. But the idea was to sort of break away from this very one-dimensional situation that we get in advanced capitalism, which is you have this one role which defines you and this one specialization. And really it was an attack on that. It was sort of a holistic approach to music, and just seeing music in that sort of terms, in a healing sort of way as well. I mean, there's a tremendous influence from shamanism in the music, and that is that integration with the animal world and the world of rocks and minerals and plants and flowers and trees and things. That has been a constant all the way through it.
Yeah, because at the beginning you were living in London, but it seems like you moved quite fast out of London. How long did you stay in London?
I was actually developing the ideas from the pump for maybe a year before I moved into London. Caroline already lived in London, and when I moved into London, we set up space in a squat in Lilford Road. It was a terraced house. At that time, lots of people were squatting. It wasn't particularly politicized squatting. There were empty buildings available, and it was making good use of these available buildings before this sort of horrendous property boom and this horrendous denial of a right to free space happened later on. So we used that for studio space. We had studio space, working space, living space, and also socializing space. I suppose our friends stayed there as well when they were passing through. And we connected with other people who were squatting and with other bands who were squatting and developing perhaps similar kind of ideas, perhaps other bands who were on a different path.
Yeah. But
who were passing through that particular phase. Yeah, so I squatted in London for 10 years, from 1979 to I think it was 1989. And during that period, I noticed it got more and more difficult for me to live in London because there was sort of this extreme changes that were happening from Margaret Thatcher's time, this sort of erosion of workers' rights, and this tremendous gulf that was happening between very, very rich people and very, very poor people. And I found that quite disturbing. And also I found it too disturbing to live in London that time. So I thought, where shall I go? I moved back into the Peak District, which is where I originate from, for about a year, and lived at my mum's house. And then I lived in, a friend of mine was setting up a pottery in Newcastle. Okay. And he had some ideas for setting up some sort of an artist collective up there. So I moved up to Newcastle for 2 or 3 years, which is in the northeast of England. But I found it, I didn't find it conducive to what I was doing, really. And I just moved to Cornwall in the mid-90s, and I've been here ever since, really, in rural Cornwall.
Okay, what was it willing to reconnect with nature, or?
I guess it was, really, yeah. I think nature keeps me as sane as I'm ever going to be kept sane.
Yeah, because especially in the second part of your release, we can feel the importance of nature on your work, even on your future more, how will I say that, ambient project. There is nature everywhere, so it's it's all there through all the recordings. But I think perhaps people notice the electronic distortion more in the earlier recordings, because there was actually some quite angry contrast going on there in the earlier recordings. But we're choosing natural environmental sounds all along. Yeah.
And there's animals in there all along,
Yeah. How did you work at that time? What kind of material did you use, and how did you build the sound technically of Nocturnal Emission?
Well, my approach is, my weapon of choice would be the recorded sound in some way, recorded and manipulated sound, perhaps more so than synthesizers. I think I use a synthesizer sound because that is a common language. It's become a common language. But I think before I use that, I would use sounds of... Hold on, my dog's barking.
Not a problem. It's nice to have animals with us in the show.
Nigel, we are going to take a musical break with some music from Nocturnal Emissions. And the first track we're going to play is Dogs from Fruiting Body, issued in 1981 on Sterile Records.
Well, what great music that was, eh? Those interruptions by dogs, you see?
Exactly, it was perfect.
Okay, so before we resume the interview, just tell your dog I said hi. So, next, Symphony of a Great City. from the album Duty Experiments. We have an issue on Soleilmoon recordings in 1995, and the last Norepinephrine on Drowning in the Sea of Bliss, Anthems of the Mid Generation, issued in 1983 initially on Sterile Records. You are listening to Tormentor Radio Show on Radio Libertaire, and we are still in communication from Paris to Cornwall, UK, where Nigel Ayers is currently based.
So we started to speak a bit before the music part about the technical way of building Nocturnal Emission. Can you explain to us how you worked and what kind of machine you were using at the beginning?
Yeah, I worked with cassette recorders. Sometimes I worked with multiple very cheap cassette recorders. I using overdub techniques. Sometimes I used triggering techniques. I used techniques of tape manipulation, such as backwards tapes. I used tape delays. In the very early on, before I actually had many instruments of my own, I used to borrow instruments. So I'd be going to evening classes and using Revox reel-to-reel tape machines and doing effects on using two Revoxes, running one tape to another to create very long delayed effects, which then fed back into themselves, which is a kind of technique that Robert Fripp used, I believe, and called Frippatronics.
It was also the concrete music, the musique concrète.
Definitely. I was well versed in musique concrète by that stage, really, because I'd been messing around with tape, reel-to-reel tape, since I was about 12 or 13 years old. So before I actually got into producing it for anybody to listen to, I would be making tapes. I've been making tapes for parties anyway. So it was just a natural progression from that. I didn't see myself as a musician. I still see myself as a collage artist.
Yeah, which is logical when you know a bit your project. I have always had problems to put you into the industrial scenes because to me you were more into concrete music.
Yeah.
So it's a bit strange to find you into this industrial section where you don't really fit in.
We never did fit into this industrial section, never did fit into that, never quite understood it. I could see that it was there was a sort of a body of, I don't know, it just seemed to be a body of ideas that might have been. I never really felt integrated into that. I could see myself using elements from that and ideas from that in a collage type way, but in the same way that I would use elements from mainstream pop music or from traditional music from anywhere in the world. But I didn't see myself as part of that. I think very much there was a sort of a network of interest that it set up, and I think when you work as an artist, they very much want you to put you in a bin with the where do I store this? Where do I store this? And rather than storing things by alphabeticizing them or by color coding them, it's done by genre.
Yeah. Indeed, we can also see that in Sterile record catalog, because just after Maurizio Bianchi, you released a Lustmore album. It was the third production you did in 1981. How did that happen?
Brian Williams was at that time. I met him at a gig. He was a colossal fan of Throbbing Gristle. He was a big collector of Throbbing Gristle. He absolutely worshipped them, and then he started absolutely worshipping SPK. So I met him at this SPK concert and got to know him. He was at the time he was living in Wales, and he was working in a paint factory, and he was very keen to express himself in some way, really. And he sent me a cassette tape, and I released a cassette tape, and I thought, well, we might as well do this as a record. So I hired a studio. At that time, I got to know, talking of musique concrète, I got to know the guy who made EMS synthesizers at that time, who had a little studio in Putney, because we were using the EMS synth then And
the AKS, huh? Was it?
Yeah. Well, we had the Symphony one, but he modified it for us.
Wow.
And he built me some equipment for the studio, because he was working with these sound inventors who were making bits of equipment that were being promoted through the electronics magazines, Electronics Today International type magazines. And he put me together some of these kits. One was a vocoder, which are used rather a lot on Drowning in a Sea of Bliss, I think.
Yeah.
And he put a digital delay line, which he also modified it for us, so he could use this digital delay line as a very basic sampler, which was quite unique in those days, because samplers hadn't actually got onto the market yet. Yeah. This is before you got the Fairlight came out or anything like that. We were using this sort of very simple sampler technology within what we were doing through a modified digital delay line. Yeah, so I knew him. So I had some time in his studio, and got Brian Williams came down from Wales. And because he wasn't actually a musician at that time, he thought, I better take some friends along. Who do I know? So he brought in his mate, who's called, I think it was called Nigel something, and then he also brought Jeff Rushton in, who was in contact with, who was also they were great letter writers. Both of them used to send lots and lots of letters. I used to get lots of letters from both of them, so I sort of connected up with them that way. And I think Jeff was just at that time he just joined the Temple of Psychic Youth. And he was going through these silly ritual initiations, which seemed like he just liked getting himself beaten up, really. And he's just into this self-harm sort of a thing. And I thought, oh dear. So I didn't really have much to do with him after that, because I just didn't like the direction he was going in at all. But he was involved in that record anyway. And he played bass on that, as Brian we gave him a bass guitar because he didn't know what he was doing. We gave him a bass guitar, and he sort of stood there like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and twanged a few notes on this bass guitar. Okay. And that's what happened.
It's time now to play some new tracks from Nocturnal Emissions. The first will be Concentration Theme from Viral Shading on Klanggalerie in 2008. Then Never Give Up from Songs of Love and Revolutions on Sterile Records in 1985. And finally, Don't Believe It's Over from Duty Experiments, 1982-1984 years, on Soleilmoon Recordings in 1988.
relax completely. You're just letting go, unwinding, and completely relaxing now, allowing the quietness of spirit to begin to come in. And it feels good. And it feels good. And it feels good. To unwind and let go. So relaxed and so at ease. You're relaxed and at ease and at peace with yourself, the world, and everyone else. Make this real with the unlimited power of your mind. And relax completely. You're just letting go, unwinding, and completely relaxing now, allowing the quietness of spirit to begin to come in. And it feels good. And it feels good. And it feels good to unwind and let go. So relaxed and so at ease. You're relaxed and at ease and at peace with yourself, the world, and everyone in it. Make this real with the unlimited power of your mind.
Never give up. Never give up.
Make this real with the unlimited power of your mind.
Never give up. Never give up. Do try as hard as you can. Never wear anything with a permanent press label in it. Don't ever drink or eat anything instant. Don't ever drink or eat anything instant. Don't ever read a tabloid newspaper. You've got to try as hard as you can. You've got to try as hard as you can. Thou shalt have no other gods before thyself. Thou shalt not kill whales or baby seals. Never give up.
So relaxed and so at ease. Make this real with the unlimited power of your mind.
Never give up. Never wear anything with a permanent press label in it. Don't ever drink or eat anything instant. Don't ever drink or eat anything instant. Don't ever read a tabloid newspaper. You've got to try as hard as you can. You've got to try as hard as you can. Thou shalt have no other gods before thyself.
We continue our phone interview with Nigel Ayers from the pioneering experimental project Nocturnal Emissions in Tormentor radio show on Radio Libertaire.
So that was for the more poppy music part. We decided to put that just between the more noisy one and before to get into more ambient stuff. So that's why we play those now, because those tracks are probably those most popular from Nocturnal Emission. I mean, if you go through internet, Never Give Up and Don't Believe It's Over are your big hits. How did you manage that? Did you wanted to have such a big hit?
I didn't have anything to do with Don't Believe It's Over. That wasn't me. But Never Give Up, it wasn't designed. It could be a big hit. Who cares? You know, if it keeps the project going and it's a big hit, that's okay. I mean, it's simply it was ideas that we were trying out at the time. We were trying out this idea of perhaps we could do something interesting with this sort of. I suppose it's quite Thatcherite electro pop that was going on at the moment, wasn't it? It's very aspirational electro pop sound was going on at the time, and I think we're sort of looking for a way through that by putting that sort of class consciousness in it. Certainly maybe not with Never Give Up, but with the rest of the songs and Revolution. I mean, that was what was going on. It was like just a view to different possibilities, perhaps a revolutionary possibility, and perhaps quite a destructive possibility if you follow the logic of some revolutions that have happened.
Yeah.
So it's very future, but I mean it's very sort of everything that I've done is sort of about the present. It's about the present time, and it's also looking towards the future. And I think there was a lot of prescience. It was sort of like being a mini Nostradamus, really, of what's happening. And you sort of pick these up through the collage process. As far as I'm concerned. As far as I was concerned, the idea was to keep the project going. It wasn't to have a hit, and that was the thing. Mm-hmm. I could see, but that wasn't the point.
I must say they are even more relevant today with the worldwide actuality, without targeting anything special, but with what the whole world is now facing. I mean, those two tracks are very relevant today. Was it like a kind of vision that you just spoke of Nostradamus? So, but it's probably also the way it could be interpreted today.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're working with the moment, but I mean, the point is, I'm not. I've never been in the business of selling instant pop songs, which they might be around forever, but that's not the idea of getting this sort of big hits. It's always been work that's going to last. That's why I keep it in circulation. It just doesn't matter if it sells in tens or thousands. You know, that isn't the point of it.
Yeah. Actually, the Don't Believe It's Over was released on the tape Duty Experiment at that time, but is not to be found on the CD version of Duty Experiment. This track, for what I discovered, was made by Caroline at the time. And
yeah, she made it with a collaborator called Beverly. I think her stage name was Beverly Island. I have not seen her since then, and nobody seems to know where she is since then, who she co-wrote that with. But the idea with that was that she was writing songs and hoping that people would take up these songs and release them. So I think it was a demo that was being sent around commercial studios at the time. I think that was the idea. I think she wanted to do something electronic. Maybe she'd been making acoustic music up till then. I don't know what the idea was. I wasn't involved in Don't Believe It's Over. That was just included on the cassette because it happened to be on the tape that Caroline. I said to Caroline, we've got I think it was a 1 hour cassette. I said, have you got anything else that we can put on this? And she gave me that. So you could put this on it. So I did.
Yeah. Yeah, and Caroline seems to be at the beginning the only one that had a music training. She was quite good in piano.
Yes, it was good. It was good to me. She had very good technical skills, and for me, this was good. Although, so when we wrote songs, I mean, I'd be sort of humming tunes to her or singing tunes to her and saying, "Can you play this? Can you play this? And can you do it like this? And can you do it? Can you make it sound like this sort of thing?" So she did put that. Yeah, that was. She did have skills that I didn't have in that area at that time.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting, the mix, because there was a technical part, the more musician part, mixed with your experimental part. That maybe this is also what give Nocturnal Emission identity.
Yeah, but I'll have to say though, like as far as her musical technique was concerned, it wasn't really all that far developed at that stage. It was more developed than mine was at that stage, but in terms of other people that we worked with since, or people that she worked with in the studio, they had more musical skills than that. Mm-hmm. And she would never perform in public, for example. So yeah, that's hard to say, really.
And what was the role of your brother in Nocturnal Emission?
He was very interested in actually making electronic instruments. So from a technical side, I pulled him in because I wanted to learn about electronics and to put electronics into it. And also, he was very keen on noisy punk rock, and that was a sort of an element, this guitar part. Yeah, I suppose that was his input at the time.
In your discography, there are some tracks that are very punk.
Yeah,
so that was coming from him.
There's a track in the Pump. There's the Beast with Five Fingers, which came from him.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think what. I think the records in the Pump, and he's helped out along the way, but he's never sort of been like a full-time member, if you see what I mean. He's been a helper, but he's not sort of been around all the time.
Yeah. Regarding what your next musical turn is, you were slowly but surely getting more into ambient section. Thing that we can feel in many of your albums after, I will say, 87, 88, around that. To me, the album that surprises me the most at that time was The World Is My Womb. How did you slowly get into that really more deep ambient and more natural?
Yeah, I think there was actually a two-year gap between the previous record, which I think was Songs and Love and Revolution, and when I actually did The World Is My Womb. And I think it was a time I think I really had to re-examine musical direction and philosophical direction, really. So it was a time of great reflection and thought experiment went on. One of the things that I was exploring was probably deeper with traditional musics. I got very interested in traditional music from probably about 83 onwards, and music from different cultures, and looking at the shamanistic side of it. And also I was very interested in how the music was used in meditation and in meditative music and in devotional music and medieval music. I think World Is My Womb is very apocalyptic in that sense, that it's a sort of millennialist type of thing. It's looking towards spirit future. And what does this spirit future mean? It's kind of a breakdown. And I'm using metaphors there, which I wouldn't use before, which were metaphors of, I think it was talking about saints and gods and things like that, which are not necessarily things I would believe in, but I think they're useful metaphors. There's probably quite an influence of William Blake in there, I should imagine. Mm-hmm. But I was going through like a visionary experiences, really. And just a big reassessment of what I'd done so far. And not just in the previous 5 years in Nocturnal Emissions, but in my whole background in art and music, because my background's in art before I got into music. And just looking at integrating that whole thing, really. But just sort of honestly dealing with my experience rather than, I think you tend to create a character or something, and you're supposed to stick with a character or something when you're being commodified as an artist or a musician. You create commodities, say, for a marketplace, and in turn, the marketplace tends to commodify yourself. So I was always looking at that.
Yeah, this is something that you develop in some other great album. I rediscovered I think it's 2 years ago when it was re-edited, the Spirit Flesh album that Mannequin re-released. I think it's, when was that, 3-4 years ago?
It was re-released 3 or 4 years ago, yeah. Spirit Flesh was what recorded 89, was it? 89, 90? Sometime around then.
Yeah. And in this one, you go even deeply into the more traditional, old spirit, old culture, also shamanism again. We're going to play one track called Thor's Cave, which is also very, to me was a track that left a big trace, because it was very into this a new world of nocturnal emission, like you changing skin almost every albums, so never knowing where you were going.
Yeah, are you going to play that now, or do you want to talk about that?
We're gonna play that. I think.
Okay.
Benjamin can introduce the track we're going to play, and just after we're going to speak of it.
Okay. I think Laurent is a bit ahead of the program, but we will eventually play that. So let's go back to some more music for the sake of our listeners' health. And for the next 20 minutes, we are going to listen to 2 tracks. The first is Buffel Not Stand / Are You Feeling? On the Sterile Records issued Befehl Not Stand in 1983.
So it's a German word, it's a Befehl Notstand.
Okay. And then Boo, issued on the Autonomia, the Portland album EP, issued by Soleilmoon Recordings in 1996. So still between Paris and Cornwall, where we have the honor and privilege to have Nigel Ayers from Nocturnal Emissions on the phone in Tormentor radio show on Radio Libertaire.
We wanted also to speak about your American trip because Autonomia, for example, is an album that brought us again in another world. How did you decide to go into that studying of the capitalism world in America in some way? Is it?
I think European culture and capitalism permeates sort of world culture. Really, I think their biggest export is cultural, and it's sort of. But also, what we call American is actually this European immigrant, hyper-capitalist culture anyway. Mm-hmm. So we're to blame for all that.
Yeah, of
or
course.
our ancestors are to blame for all that. Let's say the slave trade and tobacco routes and all that kind of thing. Yeah, what we were looking at then. What was it? Biff Belchnot Stand. You were playing. I mean, the title of that. I mean, in a way, it's sort of it's a self-parody. Because Belchnot Stand was the defense that Adolf Eichmann used when he was standing trial for war crimes. In fact, I think it was for running Auschwitz or something. And the story that they trotted out was, I was just doing my job. And this was the defense that was used by Nazi war criminals, that they were just doing their job. And I think this is something we really need to look at. I mean, do we really need to be just doing our job, or should we be just looking at the life that we take up? Should we be examining it a little bit more critically? Should there be a bit more critical thinking in the world? I think there should be some more critical thinking. I think we need to reassess the way that the world is going, and not blithely follow these expected paths, because they aren't headed in a very good direction. And I think it's really a good idea to do a lot of self-examination. And I think that's what I've tried to do through the Nocturnal Emissions project. Is there's a tremendous amount of self-examination and autobiographical examination going on there. And it's partly to do with my own personal experience, and also the way that experience is mediated through the dream world, which we create ourselves, and the dream world which is sold back to us by the algorithms. They are now, aren't they?
Everywhere.
The algorithms that are everywhere. These patterns that are being set up. But really, I've tried to take a step back from that, but also not a step back, but then looking at it, which is why there's these excursions into this sort of form of acid house, or this form of hip hop, this mutant form of hip hop, which are currents I've explored in my work.
Yeah. How did you came on the idea of the album Autonomia, which is again something completely a new face for Nocturnal Emission?
On that one, I was sent some hacked telephone calls from Charles Pound, who does a Soleilmoon label. So that the vocal part was mostly from these telephone calls. That's if we're talking about the same record. What's the question?
Yeah, I mean it's a question, and also the way you rebuild those conversation. Where do they come from?
He was very much in contact. I met Charles Pound through Mike Harding of Touch Recordings in London, yeah. Touch Music in London.
Yeah.
I used to see rather a lot of Mike, and that's how I got to know Charles Pound, because he used to do the distribution for Touch in the USA. So Charles had been listening to this record by Scanner, who did this piece. He used to listen to telephone recordings, and he just did these CDs, which were just simply voices plucked from the air, these sort of conversations of drug dealers and petty criminals and just the type of people who use mobile phones back in those days. It was sort of quite a minority thing, really, mobile phones.
Yeah.
I don't think you can bug your phones in quite the same way these days with 3G or whatever it is, 4G. But that's what that was. This sort of voyeurism, I guess, of an aspect of everyday life. But then I built up some sounds around that, sounds and rhythms around that, from what I remember.
It's quite interesting album, and also you were speaking of Touch Records, so it's also a label that we can feel part in Nocturnal Emission, because it's how could I say that, something more fields recording ambient label, which is also a part of what Nocturnal Emission is in some way.
Yeah, I think that was the point of interest between both of us. Really, we were exploring, both me and John Wozencroft and Mike Harding back then. I think we're all looking at this crossover between non-pop mainstream music, really, and just other ways of just other approaches to sound. I think they obviously they developed a boutique label in their own with a very designery, isn't it? The Touch label. Yeah. I think it's very much got that sort of. I think John used to work with Neville Brody. For me, at times, it was a triumph of form over content. I think that would have been my criticism of them back at the time. I think for me, the emphasis was sort of getting ideas over, and it was sort of stripping away at things, and there was a messiness to what I was doing, which was probably very different to this very 80s design approach, this approach to typography, this emphasis on typography, which John Wozencroft was exploring. So, and also I think the directions were also very different because of the class backgrounds that we were from, because their background is very very comfortably off. They could, they've got the resources to run this. They've got money, which is not what I had. The Touch project has got money, and it's from this position of comfort. Whereas I think I've sort of scraped by with very menial jobs to keep the practice going. And I think my approach is probably different because I see things in a different way. I mean, what comes to mind is I think some of the early Nocturnal Emissions work was very critical of American culture in terms of Hollywood, perhaps Hollywood culture, or some of the assumptions that were the colonialism, American colonialism. And Mike didn't get this when I told him. He said, "Oh, that's just being racist against Americans." Well, it's not being racist against Americans because obviously Americans are a diverse people, but it is certainly a critique of American colonialism.
Do you speak of imperialism, the American imperialism?
Imperialism, yeah, imperialism, yeah. Imperialism, colonialism, yeah. I think that's the idea, imperialism, and I feel like I have been colonized by Hollywood and its dreams and the dreams of video games, and this dream. I'm colonized by these dream worlds, which have sort of been manufactured in laboratories, Disney's laboratories, and in DreamWorks laboratories, and in Silicon Valley. These algorithms, I feel that personally I have been colonized by these media viruses, and it all goes back to the propaganda efforts of this imperial power.
Yeah, which seems to work quite well on all Europe lately, huh?
Yeah, certainly.
So I think
they're not the only imperial power going. Let's get we're not going to say that they're the only imperial going. I mean, there's various imperial powers, sort of each with their own methods.
Of course, we are facing it in our country, right? Very hardly. So it's quite something progressive the last 10, 15 years, I will say, in all Europe. How do you feel that in England lately?
For me, I think the major threat is this permeation of algorithms, and I think this divisiveness that's going on, this sort of real huge divisions that have been drawn up, just from like artificers like Brexit. I mean, it's a trade Brexit. I mean, this was a sort of convenient trade mechanism. So why has this been made into such an issue? A black and white issue. Why is it right and it's wrong? Black lives mattering, gender issues. These sort of conflicts, which are sort of being really blown up out of all proportion by these sort of algorithmic nonsense.
Yeah, I do get that as well.
I think it's something that I feel like I'm currently assimilating because these are changes that are happening to everybody in the world at the moment. And I don't know, I think we do need to reassess a lot of this, because I think we're probably going through, capitalism throws up crises after crises. That's sort of the nature of the economic system. It is crisis based. It's just sort of, there's always a hope that science is going to pull us through this.
We saw that with the COVID, huh?
Yeah. Oh, science is going to pull us through. I mean, this is the idea with the climate thing. Science is going, there'll be a scientific solution to this. Well, I'm not so sure that there will be a scientific. This is not given. It is not given that science is going to pull us through this. It might, there might be a certain amount of arrogance involved here as a species arrogance.
Yeah.
But we do live in bizarre times, though. I mean, just the incredible amount of wealth which is concentrated in very few hands.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't conspiracy theory at all. There is an incredible, I just find it mind-boggling that somebody can have that amount of wealth, which is impossible to spend or impossible to do anything with of any sort of social use. It just really bewilders me.
It is time for us to take a new musical break with 3 titles we discussed about a few minutes ago. The first is Electric Horizon from The Quickening, from Earthly Delights in 1983. Second, Lighten Our Darkness in The World Is My Womb on Earthly Delights in 1987. And then Thor's Cave on Spirit Flesh, Earthly Delights 1988. You're listening to Tormentor radio show on Radio Libertaire. This is the last part of our fun interview with Nigel Ayers from the cult act Nocturnal Emissions.
I must say I was very big listener and listening a lot to The World Is My Womb. But there are many other albums that you should dig in. Sadly, in this program, we didn't have space enough to play everything we wanted. That's why after the show, you will have 3 hours more of only Nocturnal Emission. So to give you more brighter ideas of the massive work that Nigel did in the last 40 years now. So how is the future of Nocturnal Emission is going to look?
I don't know. Bleak. It looks grim. It's grim. Yeah. It can only get worse. Things can only get worse.
I have heard from one of your friends, Simon Crabb, that we had 1 month ago, a little less than 1 month ago, that you are working on a collaboration. Can you give us more information on that one?
That's so funny. I've known Simon since he was 18. That's really funny. I mean, and we've played together in various bands. We played on the same stage very often. I think I performed in Bourbonnais Cork. I think I did some recordings for them, and they've certainly members of Bourbonnais Cork, and certainly he's given Nocturnal Emissions a hand over the years. We've been very close, especially back in the 80s when we were living around the corner from one another. We used to sort of hang out most nights, and they didn't actually have any tools to open up their first squats, so I used to go around there and lend them a crowbar and sort of take my hammer and chisel round to sort of chisel open doors so they could open them up and find somewhere to live. So like many years later, I haven't actually seen Simon from probably about 89. Oh, I saw him once in London, yeah. I haven't seen him since 1989 till about 5 years ago. So he's sort of gone and done whatever he's done. I think he had a family, had a business and all this sort of thing. And he's playing music again.
Children as well, as he told us.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got grown-up children and all that sort of thing. So his life has very much moved on from when I knew him when he was a young man. And when I was a young man also. But so it was good to meet up with him, you know, we did some gigs together and just went through all the nonsense that you go through when you're doing this sort of thing. And it was good company. I enjoyed that. So I think he suggested, I'm going to say, I'll blame him for suggesting we should do a collaboration, but maybe I suggested it. I don't know who's to blame. But I think the way we both are, I don't know. It's sort of gone this way and it's gone that way, and there is some material work in progress, but I don't know if anything's going to happen in a great hurry. It sounds very promising what we've done so far, but
I must say it's probably
give it some time.
Take all the time you need. I mean, I must say I'm very curious because you both of your project I'm following since almost 30 years now, both of them, and I was wondering about that, if that could happen. And when Simon told me about it, I was like, it's a dream happening. So you have to continue on that one, and I hope.
Yeah.
It will see the light of the day not very soon. I mean, take all the time you need. It can only. I think we
will be taking some time because we're obviously at a social. We're at a social distance. I know because I'm in Cornwall.
Yeah.
And he's over in the east of England. He's in Hastings, so we're not sort of in physical proximity. And so maybe I might have to remind him that we're doing it, or he might have to remind me that we're doing it. But it's sort of gone. It's sort of. I think he's in his own sort of work. He's had some quite radical departures, and his own approach to music is certainly different to this industrial nonsense. I really like the graphics he's been doing on his recent releases. It's Simon Crabbe releases.
Yeah,
some beautiful graphics on there.
Especially the last solo album he released. I was very surprised, and it's a very, very good album. He spoke of us also of the second collaboration that he is finalizing now with 23 Skidoo, which is also a band that I will relate it to your world as well.
I don't know them, but I think he lives close to Fritz Katlin, who used to be the drummer with 23 Skidoo, and I think he worked in some various other bands. I think, but I don't know him myself. But that's the direction he's exploring, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, the album is gonna.
They both live in the same town, though. You see.
Yeah.
I'm over here in Cornwall.
So I've got a little question to ask to you. Speaking of collaborations, you happen to collaborate with the Japanese CCCC, and you have some words to share about that.
That was interesting, wasn't it? That was sort of very that was very noisy. I like doing that. I think what I actually contributed to that was I think they just put it through lots and lots of extreme distortion.
Yeah, it's a typical Japanese noisy band, huh?
Yeah, I like their approach though, because their approach is they're looking at noise as first as a psychedelic, not a psychedelic element, the therapeutic value of noise they're looking at, and I think that there's very strong elements of nature and the weather and of within their work, which is different to Japanese noise, if you see what I mean. So there's noise and there's noise, but I think there's certain elements within what they do, which I quite like.
Yeah, it feels very logical. If you know the band that you work with them, it's there is you share some common ideas and way of thinking music.
Yeah. I met up with him. I mean, I do tend to collaborate with. I also collaborate with people who I've never actually met, but have actually been in correspondence with for years, like PBK, which Philip Klinger. I've just done a collaboration with him in the USA. I think we're going to do a further one with him. And who else? Robin Story, I did 1 or 2 collaborations with him. I do know him, but I actually did the collaborations with him. I wasn't living in the same neighborhood with him. Rapun, Soviet France.
Yeah, very nice project.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certainly overlapping ideas we had, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, and the comment release that you did together is also very interesting. It's bring the whole world in something completely new again.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, as a collagist, though, I think I'm working with collage anyway through my art and through my music. So the idea of art is a collaborative process anyway. Whatever. No, it isn't always a collaborative process because you're collaborating with the natural world and with materials, but also you're collaborating with pre-existing materials. So to put that through an extra filter and a different framing, it's interesting, because it is what you're doing is a process. Really, it's not really it's a process. It's a social process. The whole business of it.
Does he works in the same way that you do, and in collage? Oh,
Robin.
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, he works. He does a lot of printing, doesn't he? Does like monotype prints and paint. So I think that very much the textures in paint very much informs what he does. Dirt and grit and symbols, sort of blurry symbols, maybe like I think it's called eidetic. Is it eidetic imagery, like the imagery that the eyes produce when there's no light?
Mm.
I get this sort of vibe from what Robin does, and this is something which interests me.
And he's also painting all his covers himself, huh? Most of them. So he's got a complete visual and sound for his project.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I try to do all everything myself, you know, but I just run out of energy, you know. It's the idea is I make films, and obviously I do the visual art, which is all been compiled in this book recently. So that's sort of very much what I do. But like I say, I mean, it's sort of, you start to overstretch yourself a bit. So so I have tended to collaborate with people.
Yeah. I must ask a question for Hugo, because he's a big fan of Mike Ayers. How was the collaboration with him? How did you came on the idea?
That was really funny. The late John Everall set that up. Now, Mick Ayers I've worked with two very good percussionists. I've collaborated with two very good percussionists. One's him, because obviously he developed that sound within Napalm Death. There is a sort of drum sound which Napalm Death developed, and he's also developed this very strong rhythmic sound through. It's Scorn that he does, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Very dark dub project.
Yeah, and then the other person who I did a collaboration with, which hasn't actually been released. It's been sort of sitting on one shelf in Germany it's sat on a shelf in Germany for maybe 15, 20 years, and it's been sitting in a shelf in America for another couple of years. I did a collaboration with Zev, a percussion player, as well. That's not been released, but I played with both of these, and what came out was not at all rhythmic. It was all, with both of them, it's very much a sort of a textural thing that's come out. Very, very much reverb based, and very much to do with, perhaps it's the hollows of the drums that we're listening to rather than the pounding. Maybe we're just listening to the space, the resounding space when I've worked with them. It's odd though, because I admire both their work as drummers and percussionists, but what's come out of this collaboration has sort of been more like the resonance and the residue of that.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna introduce the last part of music, and it's gonna be the end of the interview. We were very happy to have you tonight. It would have been even better if we could have you 2 or 3 hours long, but I think you have also a life to go on with.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, I think in talking to you, I think maybe what may come out from this interview is I might sort of come across as sort of being very critical, but I think as an artist, although you work as a collaborator, you've got this critical element, and you're always sort of trying to define a space, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
A space where others haven't been, and I think it may come across as being negative when this sort of comes out, but I suppose that's it. I think as any artist has to be very critical of all the other work that goes around.
Yeah,
you don't take that for granted.
Do you have plans for the near future? Are you gonna tour again with Nocturnal Emission? Do you have live planned?
Well, everything has been shelved because of COVID. So when things open up again, I should be coming over to Paris sometime shortly and doing some promotion for the book and some sort of some sort of retrospective talk of some. I may be doing a talk with it, or question and answers to do with Electronic Resistance, which is this book that's just been published of graphic work and texts from the 1980s. So I might be sort of coming over to do something with that. I might be coming over and actually playing some new material there. And I keep busy, you know.
Yeah, you always wear, huh? A lot of work. I don't know if you even find time to sleep sometimes.
No.
So, do you know when you're gonna come for the book in Paris?
I don't know. We're looking at June.
Oh, great! Feel free to let us know about that. We will make some promotion for you, and of course we will be there.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be earlier, but I mean, obviously the COVID restrictions stopped people coming over.
Yeah, of course.
So so I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry.
Okay.
It's time to wrap up the emission. So thank you very much, Nigel, for giving us your time. And we are going to listen 3 titles to finish that. First, As If Vietnam Never Happened on Collateral Salvage on Soleilmoon in 2003, then Earthlights on Futuristic Antiquarianism on Soleilmoon in 2000, and then a title from Caroline Kay, Between the Spaces, on her only album No Wait for Last Year, on Earthly Delights in 1987, and re-released a few times on Klanggalerie, Blackest Ever Black, and All Captain.
So thank you very much, Nigel, and we wish you a nice weekend.
All right, thank you. Nice to speak to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.